Welcome to the Good, the Bad, and the Sequel Q&A. My name's Doug. So the next sequel that we're going to be covering is one that everyone thinks about, whether it be going onto a highway and pulling behind a tractor trailer that has logs or pipes. You're thinking about the scene from Final Destination 2. I know you are. I think about it. So many people think about it. And even this week's guest, who's a writer of that one, he wrote the first one. He was the creator of it, Jeffrey Reddick. He even says every week he's been getting tagged in a meme of the logs on a tractor trailer because everybody thinks about it. It is in the zeitgeist. People use that word, and it was so fascinating to hear him mention he could never imagine that it's used as like, man, you almost got Final Destination. Like, that's something that people say. So it was cool to hear about his journey from Kentucky to Hollywood and a little stop in New York City when he was working for New Line, because as a kid, he was ballsy. He wrote Bob Shaye a prequel script to Nightmare on Elm Street at the age of 14. And then he kept in contact with him. And, years later, he's working for New Line in New York City. So great stories about how Final Destination started as a spec script. I'm not going to say what show. The story is amazing, from how it started from a spec script to becoming Final Destination, and the tweaks that were made to that script and the connection to what show that spec script was for, to the actual movie Final Destination when it was actually finished, who worked on it. It's pretty fascinating. We talked a little bit about the new one that was coming out. Obviously, couldn't divulge any information. Just lots of fun. I love talking to Jeffrey. He's set to, in the next few months, direct a slasher, and he's a big slasher fan, which is pretty cool. And just hearing about his process when it comes to writing, what inspired him to make Final Destination, because most of the time when people are writing, acting, director, you know, then it start off having like a quote-unquote big hit. So it was pretty neat for him to be able to have that as the starting point in his career, like having that be the first credit on his IMDb. Pretty fascinating. Great guy to talk to. Great interview. You're going to love Jeffrey's story about his journey, to Hollywood and some of the adventures he had along the way. Before I start the interview, if you're new here, make sure you subscribe wherever you're listening. At Sequels Only, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. And if you like to read books, I helped amazing character actor Larry Hankin put together his memoirs and his book. You could find, it's on our website, sequelsonly.com, but it's on Amazon. It's called That Guy, a cautionary memoir. It's great. People are loving it. So you'll love it too. So why not check it out and sit back, relax. If you're driving behind a log truck, maybe you should pull over, because you're going to love this interview with the man who put that horrific image into our heads forever, writer, soon-to-be director, Jeffrey Reddick. Cool, man. So are you in California right now?
Yeah.
Nice.
Nice.
Striking? Are you on the picket line?
Yeah, I've been on the picket line, so
yeah,
I've been doing that. So hopefully, it's going to last a while, but hopefully not too long.
Yeah. Is this your first one or no? No, right?
I was around for the OG. Well, that wasn't the original one, but the last one that went on for like a year, almost a year. Yeah, like I was.
Was that end of 2000s or no?
It was like early 2000s.
Okay. Yeah, I remember like SNL. I forgot what it was. There was like something that I used to watch regularly, and it would just like went downhill. I don't think it was SNL. Maybe like some show, but no, it's crazy, especially with streaming. I was talking to an actor a few months ago, and he was like talking about obviously what might be coming next month.
Yeah.
With like the directors and the producers, and then also like Screen Actors Guild, like right after that, right around that same time.
Yeah.
But it's crazy. Like you never know the future, right? Like in 1776, when they wrote all these laws, they never thought about social media or all these other things that might be out there.
Yeah.
Same thing with film. Nobody thought about streaming and not like the quote unquote original syndication. So things obviously have to change.
Yeah.
For you guys.
They waited long enough. Streaming was very new during the last strike. It had just, with cable, I think there was just HBO and a few streamers out there. So their big argument then was like, well, it's a new thing. We don't know how much, we don't know how we're gonna make money, so we don't know what to do. And now it's like cut to now, and they're still trying to make that same argument. And it's like, you guys keep posting how much you're making every quarter on streaming. So we know you're making a lot of money. So it's time to pay us a little bit. Greedy bastards.
Oh, I know, right? No, and it's crazy. No, there's so many different streaming, and it's so funny. Like, remember in the beginning, it was like, all right, I'm gonna have Hulu, I'm gonna have Netflix, and now all these other places that you thought wouldn't maybe try that, then you have like the Peacocks. Like, everyone is going to that avenue, and to get it to the point that a la carte that in our minds that we thought was great. Oh, cancel cable, just get internet and get like the 4 ones I like. And then it's like, oh, but then this one has one and this one. And then you end up spending as much.
Yeah. Yeah. It's great. It's crazy. And then they're merging, and it's just, there's a lot of craziness that goes on behind the scenes. But, at the end of the day, it's kind of like, they spend a lot of money on huge shows, but it's almost like they want to punish us for all the shitty shows they make that don't make money for it. So they're like, well, we don't pay anything. Yeah, it's a very frustrating. I mean, the good thing is all the unions, the streaming is probably everyone's number one concern, and then it's like, the no working for free, which it's kind of a no brainer, and then AI is also like something that we kind of have to tackle, because I don't think the next negotiations are going to be up for they might get pushed off another 8 years, and we've already seen that AI it certainly can't write TV shows, but it could write a really bad script that they could hire somebody for really cheap to come in and format it and try to make it better. And also,
like to punch it up or something. Yeah.
They're scanning actors now so they can use them, use their digital likeness and not have to pay them like as much as they normally would. So
that's crazy. Is there any actors that like people would know that are doing that, or is it just people?
I haven't heard. I just know that they're scanning actors, and I mean, you see a lot of especially with dead actors, them using them, their likenesses, in films, and de-aging them, and a lot of times they don't. Everything's so CGI, you don't even really need. You can pay an actor a decent paycheck, and at some point, I mean, I don't think movie stars are going to ever go out of style, because people like like, you just don't have that connection. If if it's a cartoon, that's one thing, but if it's like a person, it's like, oh, well, here's Sandra AI Peterson. I love her. It's
I know, and that's something like I don't know. That's what I love about film is like everything that goes into it, all the people that are involved working on it. And I don't know, it's just I was listening to some podcast, and some guy talked about like the same thing you just mentioned, like actors being scanned and like older actors, and somebody was like, who wouldn't want to see a rom-com with Marilyn Monroe? And it was like Chris Pratt, and I'm like, I like Chris Pratt and I like Marilyn Monroe movies, but I don't know, I'm just watching it the whole time, I'd be like, this is impossible. Like, like, I don't know, it just makes no sense. But it's such a big a topic. Like, it's crazy. Like, all within a year. Like, when I first heard of like Chat GPT, I was like, oh, okay, this is like kind of fun to put things in, and then it's scary. Like, it's really scary in a way.
Yeah. Even the AI people, the people that created it, are like, we need to put some rails on this thing, because it can just be there. It can be used for good, but it can be used for as anything. It can be used for bad as well. And especially since it can impersonate people, that's the biggest thing. Like, we already don't trust what we see with our own eyes anyway. So if you start adding like AI into it, and everybody's watched Terminator movies, it's like, this is not going to end
exactly. Well. I know. It's like Terminator Genesis. Like, we covered that not too long ago, and that one is like that, because in the movie, it's basically like, ooh, this cool social media, like merging of platforms. And it's like supposed to be like the greatest thing, and everybody gets into it, and then that's what changes everything. But well, let's talk about you, Jeff. I love talking to writers, because I think it's fascinating. Your career's fascinating. Just most of the time, people, actors, directors, everyone, like their early credits are like a TV show. Like, oh, I wrote a spec for Happy Days, and then things went on. It's pretty fascinating, home run right off the bat. But obviously, I'm sure you're writing before that. So writers are always writing. But so when did that all begin for you? You grew up in Kentucky, right?
Grew up in Kentucky. Yeah, I always wanted to be an actor. It's funny you bring that up, but so I studied theater in college, and then I went to New York for a summer to go to the American
Sweet.
Academy of Dramatic Arts. And while I was there, I got an internship at New Line Cinema that made Nightmare on Elm Street. So I
Nice.
had a long history, like a long mail history with them from Kentucky. Like I kind of wrote like a prequel for A Nightmare on Elm Street when I was like 14 after I saw the movie, and I mailed it to Bob Shaye, and he kind of sent it back at first because it was unsolicited, but then I didn't even know what that meant actually because I was too young. I had to look up
Yeah.
unsolicited, and then I wrote him back, and I was like, look, I've spent like $3 on your movie, so I think you can take 5 minutes to read my story. And he read it, and so he stayed in touch with me, and his assistant Joy Mann, they stayed in touch with me from age 14 to 19, just like sending me movie posters and sending me scripts to read. It was just very, very helpful and very encouraging.
Wow. What scripts did he send you? Like nightmare scripts or other scripts that?
Nightmare on Elm Street script. I can't remember what other scripts they sent. It was so long. It was so long ago. I just remember they would send me. They sent me like the Nightmare 2 script, which I didn't like the movie at the time, but
Yeah.
I've grown to like it. But as a fan of the terrifying first movie, to kind of go and see the second one, which was like pretty much a comedy, I was like, why is this parakeet exploding? What's going on here?
Yeah.
So I did ask them to send me a lot of the scary scripts that they had, and yeah, they just encouraged me, and I went there. And I got an acting agent that summer, and I got the internship at New Line, and started off doing pretty decent with auditions in acting. But this was like the early '90s, so non-traditional casting was not a thing. So my agent was basically like, "Look, you're like an ethnic Michael J. Fox, boy next door type," and I was like, "That's great. Everybody likes Michael J. Fox." She says, "Yeah, but they don't write ethnic versions of that." So she was basically
Oh
telling
my
me,
god.
but she was being honest. Like that was just the reality.
Yeah. No, that's good. Yeah.
It was just the reality of the '90s. So she's like, I can, the only stuff that I could send you up for, like if you rapped or played basketball, there's a lot of auditions I could get you, but since you don't do those things, like there just aren't really roles like where they're asking for people that look like you. So I was like, all right, well, I'm not going to like give up on working in entertainment. So English was like my second, well, it was my best subject in school. Like we didn't really have acting in my high school. So English was my best subject. So I was like, well, I'll just start writing, and then I'll write roles for myself. And then I, obviously kept writing murdering teenager movies. And then I definitely not being a teenager anymore. But yeah, it was 97, I think, when I sold the treatment and wrote the script for Final Destination. Probably like
97. Wow.
yeah, so it was like 6 years after starting there, and I'd written several scripts before that. A couple of them actually almost got like on Weekend Read, which is when all the executives will read it over the weekend. I did have one script get on Weekend Read. I was like, holy shit! But yeah, this was the first one. Like I had the idea. I used it to write an X-Files spec script to get an agent. But then my friends at New Line were like, oh, this is a great idea. Don't like send it into the X-Files. Like you should write this as a movie. So, and a lot of this, a lot of my career, it's like a mixture. Yeah, it's definitely like work, but luck and being at the right place at the right time does help play a huge part, I think, in people's careers. Like talent, absolutely. Hard work, absolutely. But a lot of it is just luck, because I had a friend of mine who started working for two producers who had a deal at New Line. So instead of me just submitting it to New Line like I normally did, I was like, well, let me be smart and let me go through these producers, get them on board, and then have them bring it into New Line. So that way it's not just, oh, Jeffrey that works over in marketing, has another script he's written. So we developed it. It was a long process. It was like 6 months after, New Line had a really hard time getting their heads around death, not having a physical killer in the movie. They're like, oh, it doesn't
Yeah.
make sense. You can't fight it. You can't see it. We don't. And we're like, that's the whole point. That's what makes it, different. And I wanted to keep death away from being tied to any kind of belief system, like in a religion or belief system, because I was like, everybody's afraid of death. So the more nebulous you make it, the more people can project their own idea of what death is on it. And at first, all the characters were adults, but then Scream came out, and they're like, "Well, let's try making them all teenagers." I'm like, "All right, fine." I always roll with that. And
Yeah.
and then finally, I did kind of cave a little bit and gave them like during the final fight, you saw like this kind of black, like nebulous kind of entity thing show up. And they were still like, we're not sure about this. And finally, the producers are like, well, we're going to take it to Miramax if you guys pass on it, if you don't pick it up. And they're like, oh, we'll buy it. Like, buy it. So that this could have been a Harvey Weinstein movie, which would have been really great for my legacy. Um, so yeah, once they got it, I have to say they pretty much fast tracked. I mean, they went out to a couple of directors. They went to Clive Barker, which was interesting because
Wow.
I love him, and he passed on it. And then Bob Shaye, who ran New Line, was like, "What do you think about these guys, James Wong and Glenn Morgan, that work on the X Files?" And I was like, "Holy shit! Like they're great. I love their stuff."
Talk about a full circle.
Oh yeah,
You're going to send it into them, and
yeah.
then that's pretty funny.
Yeah, and it was very serendipitous that it went back to them. So they came on board. They did a pretty big rewrite on it, and we got it into production and it came out in 2000. So considering from the time when they picked it up to how quickly it came out, that's 3 years is a pretty quick in Hollywood time. To develop an actual script, cast it, shoot it, get it together for production, and then market it and get it out there. So yeah, that was that is the story of my Final Destination to Final Destination coming out.
And how about so you're saying major rewrite, how much change was there, scenes, what is the imprint that you still have on that movie?
Yeah, I mean the biggest change, the way I describe it, is my version was very much influenced by Nightmare on Elm Street. So since death basically didn't get them the first time, it couldn't come back and kill them. So it would basically mindfuck them over different either secrets they had or their survivor's guilt, and haunt them so much that they ended up committing suicide, which is pretty dark. So the biggest change they made was, which I'm grateful for because I think it expanded it beyond the horror audience, is they came up with the Rube Goldberg angle that death used things around you every day to get you. So that was the biggest change, in which I'm actually really grateful they did that, because I think my version would have definitely hit with the horror fans, like Death's MO, because it was very creepy, mind-bending, horrific imagery. But I think the idea that death can use anything around you to get you is much more relatable to people everywhere. So
yeah,
I was really happy with that change.
Yeah. So how'd you come up with the idea? Obviously you're inspired by Nightmare on Elm Street. Was it just thinking about a movie? Was there another type of movie that you merged together in your mind?
No, it was actually very, very mundane. Actually, I was flying home. Kentucky's good because Kentucky gave us the log truck and then the idea for this. So I was flying home to Kentucky, and I read an article, and I'm pretty sure it was in People, but I'm not sure exactly. There was some magazine I bought to read on the plane, and there was a story in there about a woman who was on vacation, and her mother said, "Don't take the flight you're on tomorrow because I have a bad feeling about it." So the woman changed her flight, and the plane that she was supposed to be on crashed. So I'm reading this on a plane, and I'm like, "Oh, this is a pretty cool idea. What if she didn't?" But I didn't have a story for it at that point. I just kind of filed it away in my head, and when it was time to come up with an idea for an X-Files spec script, I was trying to think of like what would be a good opening scene. And Scully had a brother Charles that you never really saw in the show. So I was like, oh, well, what would be cool is if Scully's brother has this premonition, gets pulled off the plane, and then everybody starts dying. So the police think it's him. Scully and Mulder have to investigate, and you know, she just, in the script, she was like, I'm this was like the final straw because she'd already lost several people, and so she's
Yeah.
like, after this, I'll be done with the X-Files, but she ends up staying with the X-Files. But yeah, that was that article started the idea is like having a premonition and then missing your time to die, and then death kind of coming to make it right, to try to clear it up.
Nice.
So,
Do you still have that spec script? Did you keep it?
yeah, I did. I think it's bloody disgusting. It's online, but it's
Oh, nice.
yeah.
I gotta find it.
Yeah, the funny thing is, because I wrote, I wrote it, but we didn't have final draft back when or maybe in an early version. I don't know what the hell we were using back then, but I didn't have the cover page. So I went and guesstimated, like I was trying to guesstimate from when I turned the material into New Line. So I think I put like, 1995 on the script. And then when it got put up online, of course, all the X-Files Uber fans were like, this is fake because this didn't happen in the X-Files until this time. So the script couldn't have been written. So it was like 96 or so, but it's just funny.
Yeah.
I just guesstimated on the date on the cover. And so it's like, well, this doesn't make this is obviously a fake script because the copyright isn't the same. And I was like, that was the level of toxic fandom back then. It's just, they would just call you out. Like, isn't real. Now they're like, we want to murder you for killing our favorite franchise.
So so in the movie, when you're writing scripts, I always ask this to writers because I think it's really cool because people do it with set design. They like especially you mentioned before Freddy's Dead, like planting things in the background. Were there any like things in the script that like have your handprints all over, like character names, like high school or anything? Did you add anything in?
There's not. I mean, in my draft, I did have like I named the school after well, it was set in New York, so I couldn't name a lot of stuff. I mean, I named characters. I mean, pretty much the only character name when James and Gloom came in, they kind of changed just even character names and stuff like that. It's something people do sometimes, I think, to mark something as their own. So they kept Alex's name, but then all the other characters they named after, which I thought was cool. They named after like famous like film directors. Like Alex Browning was Todd Browning, from Cat People. Clear was actually, I know the name of one of their secretaries. So like in my draft, her name was Kimberly and they changed it to Clear. So I just used Kimberly as the lead in the second movie. Changed that name because I always like that name. So, I think just the basic story in print, them, Alex figuring out the pattern, that they died in the crash was how death was killing them. That's the biggest thing that's in there. And then the death scenes, just because of the death's MO changing, kind of like in my version, like Todd was like the guy that gets hung in the shower in the film, which is one of my favorite scenes actually. Like in my script, he rigs up, his story is like his dad's like a preacher and he's been like selling drugs at school. So he starts feeling really guilty about all this stuff he's done. And then these people dying. And so he rigs up the garage so that when his dad comes home, he's on the phone with his dad, like apologizing. And his dad's like, like hurrying home because he's scared something's wrong. And when he opens the garage door, he hears him like choking. And we realize that Todd's like rigged a noose up in the garage so that when his dad opens it, it hangs him. So there's a lot of deaths that are the same, but they just are spun differently. So
no, it's clever, the guilt-driven thing. But no, I think when you think about those scenes, what the greatest thing is when the trickery of when you think it's going to occur, especially in that scene, because you see the water and the way the camera follows the water. I think those movies are so fascinating to me because other ones, obviously, there's only one Robert Englund, there's only one Freddy, there's only one Jason, but there is an opportunity to make another guy in a mask kills teens movies like it's done before. But I don't think, has there ever been somebody that tried to do Final Destination, like a knockoff of it? I don't think it's possible.
I haven't really. There was an old movie that I hadn't seen before I saw this, but I saw it after because somebody was like, "You ripped off this movie, Soul Survivor."
Ugh.
And no, it's fine. People
Yeah,
are,
no, I know.
but it's so I watched it. It was actually cool. It's about a plane crash where this woman's the only survivor. So like they find the wreckage and she's sitting in this chair and she's like untouched and she survived this crash and she starts seeing like people from the plane crash haunting her, and then at the end spoilers I'm going to spoil, so in case you haven't seen it's
Spoiler alert. Yeah.
She ends up killing herself, but I'm not sure if she died in the crash and this was just all like, what that Owl Creek movie, or I forget the whole name of that old movie where the guy is getting hung for a crime and then he thinks he gets away and then it ends with him like hitting the end of the rope and his neck snapping. But it's kind of Carnival of Souls. So I saw that movie and I was like, oh, this is definitely in the same vein. I haven't seen anybody like copy the movie. I've seen some movies like Truth or Dare that I think that have a very Final Destination vibe.
Oh yeah.
Killed, it's like something leads to something else, But yeah, I haven't seen any. I'm surprised. People should rip it off more. I mean, come on, it's a fun movie.
No, I think it's just so fascinating because I think it has this perfect formula. And I'm sure when you wrote this in 97 or you started with the spec strip before that, you're probably like most of the people I talk to, and they're like, I do a movie and it's done, right? But somehow, right? Could you have imagined the box office success and then the more and more being made afterwards?
I mean, as a horror fan, I had hoped that we would have a sequel. Like I was definitely hoping we'd have a sequel. I wish we had more sequels, and I wish I had a toy for Death because I have toys for all my other favorite horror movies. But the thing that I wasn't prepared for is that it would become part of like the public zeitgeist in a way that it has. Like I'll hear people sometimes when I'm out, in public with something almost happens. They're like, "Oh, that was almost a Final Destination moment." "Oh, that was Final Destination, man. You better watch out." So I never thought that it would become that. I still every week somebody's tagging me on some meme or picture of somebody behind a log truck or a truck stacked with stuff, and they're like, "Oh, not today, Death." So that that still baffles my mind that it's been 20 odd years later since the first one came out, and yeah, it's really, as a horror fan, it's just really cool. It's
a great movie. I think it encompasses, like you said, like they said, hey, Scream's big, we'll make him younger. But I think that era really has some great horror movies, like Urban Legends, obviously the Scream movies. I know you did last summer, Final Destination, and the people cast in those movies are like great actors. Like Devon Sawa has reinvented his career in like the last 5-10 years. He plays a great bad guy. Like he goes one-on-one with Stallone in Escape Plan 3, and I'm like, this is the Casper and the Little Giants. Like you think of him like that, or even in like Idle Hands. Obviously, it's a different kind of role, but it's like this guy is like, he's Ali Larder. That was like before she blew up.
Yeah,
it was like right after this is when she like took off.
Yeah, and then I remember the producer Craig Perry, who's thankfully still like really hands-on with the sequels. He was telling us like there's this, because he produced American Pie too, and he's like, there's this kid in American Pie, Sean William Scott, like, trust me, this kid's gonna blow up, you need to put him in Final Destination. So they were like, okay. So it was like, we got Sean William Scott like right before before American Pie had come out by the time we were shooting. Kristen Cloak, who's been in so many, a lot of X-Files and, Space Above and Beyond and Black Christmas. I mean, she's a great actress. They got a lot of really good talent. Keir Smith.
And Tony Todd in like this great role like what a role for him. It's
Yeah.
creepy, and you're like, oh man, dude, this is cool for
I always
him.
save Tony Todd for last because I remember when Bob came to me and he's like, because first of all, this was back in the olden days. But my one thing was like, since this is set in New York, I said let's just make sure the cast looks like New York, like we, and my mom's white, so I can say this. So I said I just don't make sure all the kids aren't, make sure everybody is not white in this classroom because that you can't pull a classroom from New York where everybody's white. And so, but they shot in Canada, so they weren't really thinking of any of that. And so, I was getting a little frustrated because I was like, this just doesn't look like New York. And they're like, well, there's a really good girl. What do you think about Tony Todd for like the mortician? I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? Like Candyman? like one of my top 3 favorite movies of all time, Candyman. Yes, please, please. And he's I've gotten to be friends with him and Devin over the years, very good friends, and they're both amazing. But Tony Todd was, he's such a great actor, and again, Candyman was one of my favorite films. But I loved him in Night of the Living Dead. I've loved him in everything he's done. He's just he did a one-man show here in Los Angeles where he played the first black welterweight champion to win a championship. And it's a one-man show, and it's over. It's like probably an hour and 15, 20 minutes where it's just him on stage, no break. And he just blows it. He just blew it out of the water. He's like, you can't not be mesmerized by this man on stage. And I went up to him afterwards, and I was like, you were so amazing in that. He's like, oh, damn it. He goes, I messed up 2 lines. I'm like, Tony, like nobody can tell, because it's not like when you mess up a line on stage, you stop and like start over. You just keep. But there was like nothing about that performance, and I love that he takes his acting so seriously. Not that that yes, you're giving him all this like praise, and he's just like focused on I fucked up 2 lines during that hour and 20-minute one-man show, and nobody. It's like, come on, dude, go easy on yourself. He's such a great person too. He's such a kind, like, loving person, and Devin's amazing too. Like to see him go from like Casper to Final Destination, where he did an amazing job, and plus he did so many things, and then to see him now coming back, and he's from Canada,
Chucky,
yeah, and he's from Canada, but he's like, if you met him, you would swear he was from like the Bronx. Like he's just got this, he's got like this machismo about him, where like you would not want to. He's a sweetheart, but you would not. You're like, yes, if I was going to put somebody up against Sylvester Stallone, I'd have no problem putting Devin up against him because I know he could hold his own, hands down. So to see him just kind of have star in all these new shows and films, like it's a great business. I mean, you have highs and you have dry spells, and you just kind of keep going. Like if you're passionate about it, you just keep going. And
want to shop Walmart Black Friday deals first? Walmart Plus members get early access to our hottest deals. Join now and get 50% off a 1-year annual membership. Shop Black Friday deals first with Walmart Plus. See terms at walmartplus.com.
Yeah, because if you stop, somebody else is going to be there for the opportunity. That's what Colbert said about being in Second City. He was basically like, because Carell, his second. So he was like, Carell just said, hey, if you stick it out long enough, you're going to make it. I don't know how long you're really going to make it on wherever you go next. Yeah. But you're going to get that opportunity because it's people coming here to scout. Some people fizzled out and some people make it, but I think it's some of those casts that they were in, man. But just those 2 names alone, Colbert and Carell, it's unbelievable. Yeah. But no, so you're talking about like you wanted a sequel, and obviously you got your wish. How quick afterwards, or were you already thinking about that in your mind and already like writing a draft?
It was funny because I had some ideas for the sequel, especially once I knew we were kind of doing the Rube Goldberg kind of aspect of it. And it was Final Destination was definitely like a sleeper hit, like a word of mouth hit, because the studio didn't put a ton of marketing money behind it at the beginning because they still weren't sure, if audiences were going to connect with it. And usually horror films like open really high, and then their second week they drop off like 50-55%. Like there's a huge drop off. And so we opened at number 3 opening weekend, but then they were tracking it during the week and the box office was going up every day. So it wasn't dropping, and they were like, oh shit. So then they started putting more money in behind it, and then word of mouth spread it. It eventually made it to number 1. And then I know that there was an article in Entertainment Weekly where they were like, of all the movies that had come out of March of that year, like that one stayed in the top 5 longer than any other film. So when I saw the numbers were going up and I saw people getting excited, I'm like, all right, I'm going to start, because I had some ideas for what I wanted to do with the sequel. Like I knew I have stuff that I love bringing back, like they call them legacy characters now. I love bringing back like some characters from the first movie, since the first movie was a bunch of teenagers getting killed. I wanted to set up an opening where you thought, oh, we're going to be following these 4 kids that are going, on this trip, and then killing all of them except for Kimberly. Like, so I wanted to do that. I wanted to set up, oh, you think these are our leads, and then splatter them all over the place. And then I wanted to like expand world a little bit. So, you find out that everybody that was supposed to die on the freeway in Final Destination 2 were only alive because people cheated death in the first movie. So I wanted to show that there was this ripple effect going outward that affected other people. So I got to do like all my favorite kind of things and in a sequel story. But it's funny because, again, typical Hollywood. I wrote the treatment. They met with everybody in town. They met with every horror, because then everybody wanted to do the second one. And then they finally came back to me and they're like, all right, we're going to buy your story. I was working on a couple other things at that point. So they were like, but we have a treatment from these 2 guys, Eric Bress and J. Mackie Gruber, who I actually adore. They're like great guys too. And I've gotten to be I haven't really hung out with J. Mackie much over the years, but I bumped into Eric at a lot of conventions and stuff, and he's just really cool. And they both are. But they're like, we want to have them write the draft of the script, but we're going to buy your story and use it. And I was like, that's cool, as long as it gets made. I'd rather it get made sooner rather than later. So, yeah. So it's funny because in the film hierarchy, I think Final Destination is probably my favorite, and I think it's because it found the right humor in it. But I also felt like that freeway pileup scene, like that was another one where it's like my original opening was the kids are going on big spring break and they stay at a hotel, and the hotel catches on fire and they get burned up, and the producer's like, we got to think of something a little better than that. And so, I'm driving home to Kentucky to see my family again, and I get behind a log truck and I pull out of the next lane, and then it hit me, and then I pulled off the freeway and I called Craig. I'm like, what about a log truck he's like, that's the opening. Yeah. And they hired David Ellis to direct the movie, and he's no longer with us, unfortunately, but he was a stunt guy. He'd worked on a lot of, did stunts on a lot of films. So he knew how to set that freeway pile up to make it as fucking awesome as it is. Like it's one thing to come up with it on paper, but then how it comes on screen is like a whole different thing. And I think he just took that to a whole nother level, because there's obviously CGI in it. There were scenes with CGI in it, but he used real stunt people and stunt doubles, and as much as he could, and he knew how to like get a lot of bang for its buck. And so that was such a fun movie.
Yeah, no, I think that's why the movies work, because I think there's a cool like formula in a sense when it comes to, you're going to get a really cool death, because they're all really cool. The first movie, second movie, so forth. They're always like really good looking. Like you mentioned Sean William Scott before. His death is so cool in the first one, because in one sense, he's thinking it's not going to be him. And then he's like thinking in his head, like, oh, if it just skipped you. And then you just see the piece of like metal and you're like, oh my God. And it just looks good.
Yeah. They lopped off half his head as opposed to like just decapitating him, or they like took off the top of his head. That's what I liked about Glenn and James. Always have this, like, if you watch their stuff, they have like this very twisted, like dark sense of humor that comes into it. That's in a lot of their work. And so I really enjoyed that stuff in the first film. It was just for me the second film just felt I don't know, there was just something about the second film because I think I got to put a lot of my because the first film went through so many. It went from an X-Files TV script where they were adults who didn't know each other to like high schoolers that knew each other. So it went through so many development changes while we were doing it, and the second one just didn't go through as many changes. So it just felt more like, even though I just wrote the treatment, which was laying out the story, it just felt more for me, having gone through the whole ride. It just felt like, oh, this is like, wow. Like
this is me. This is like me because you could see your everything stick through it. But it's fascinating the way it started, like an X-Files treatment to, I don't know if you should send that in, and then look at where it went to.
Yeah,
like what's coming out next? The 11th one or the 10th one?
I wish the 6th one.
Only the 6th one? It's just
made 5 of them. I know, like that's, and I'm saying this as a fan. I'm just saying every other fucking horror franchise has had like, we're on par with Scream as far as like they just come out with their 6th one, but every other horror franchise like Friday the 13th, I mean, there've been like a gazillion of them, and like and it's like this is a formula like I don't think.
I'm shocked. I'm looking right now. So the last one came out in 2011.
Yeah, it's going to be 13 years.
That's crazy.
Next year. Yeah, it's yeah. It starts making you feel a little old because I didn't even realize it had been that long. And somebody was like, if it comes out next year, it'll be on the 13th anniversary of the last one. I'm like, yeah. Cool number, but fuck you for making me feel so.
Yeah,
that long.
No, but it's crazy, because I think Saw is on like a 10 or 11, but again, it's like it's like this rare air of like horror movies. Even though people say horror movies, there's always a sequel. For the most part, that is the case because some of the studios are on the big ones do it because they obviously have the money, but other studios, they typically do the old sequel formula like Cannon Group did in the 80s. They'll take the movie that had the name, they'll make the sequel, and they do half the budget, and they don't put as much into it just to be able to cash in, like you were joking about. But it's true. Like some of the horror movies, the first 2-3 weekends are huge, and then people tell people, "Oh, you don't need to see this," and they drop off, which happened to a lot of the later like Nightmare on Elm Street movies because people are so jacked to see him. And even though I still enjoy him, the Dream Child, doesn't do it for me. I won't watch that too much. Or even Freddy's Dead. And I want to ask this before. I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget. Did you get to read that script? The version by the Lord of the Rings director. I can't think of his name right. Peter Jackson?
No, I didn't get to. There were so. Did he write one for Freddy's Dead or the Freddy Jason?
Freddy's Dead. He wrote one for Freddy's Dead, and I can't find it anywhere. It's like the whole holy grail of horror movies. But in the documentary, one of the former New Line guys, I forget. It wasn't like Bob Shaye, but it was another like producer. He told a story about it. And I'm like, this is the greatest idea, and I still can't believe they haven't made it yet. It was basically about like the kids in town were because Freddy was so weak, which obviously is in most of the beginning of the movies, and then he gets strong. But in this, he was like so weak that kids would take like sleeping pills to go find him and like beat him up. And then what happened was Freddy somehow killed a kid. Like, I don't know if it was some accident because they didn't go too much into it. But I'm like, God, I love that. Like, because that's what Freddy versus Jason was sort of that sense. But Freddy used Jason to kill in whatever Springwood. But no, that's really neat that you got to read those scripts. That's the first thing I thought of before. I'm like, oh man, he could be the one person that read that.
I wish they probably, because I worked in the New York office too. So we were, we did like a lot of creative stuff there, but it was, LA was, where everybody lived and all the actors and stuff lived. So I would get my hands on what I could. So when the Freddy Jason movie was being developed, like I pitched an idea. I had people like, I got to read a lot of the scripts that came through on that one. So yeah, it's just interesting to like, to see stuff that they pass on where I'm like, well, this was a really great script. I don't know why you passed on this one and then made this other version. Like, I don't understand.
Yeah. No, I think Freddy vs. Jason for me personally, like being in middle school during that time with like the internet sort of coming around and websites that posted scripts. I remember that one was one that I remember reading so many scripts before the movie came out. And then those were just ones that never got made. Some of those were ones that were ever sent to New Line or just fans put them online. But no, some scripts are really cool. If you ever have a chance, you read it's the 1980 or 1981 version of Batman. It's still Michael. It's still not Michael Keaton, but it's Batman versus Joker. It's like really dark. It's even darker than the other one, but it's neat to go back and like read some scripts to see how it really should have been. But
or how it could have been, or what almost was. So
I want to fry. Are you a Jason fan? You should be. 13th, man. They got to make that.
Yeah. No, I like Jason. I like all. I mean, I like all the slasher movies and the supernatural. So I've just grown up watching these movies. So there's always something near and dear to my heart about them. Even the movies where they go off the rails. I usually find something to enjoy about them. Yeah, because
you have to. That's it's great about movie watching. Like when you rent a movie as a kid, or you watch it when you're younger, and there's not like streaming to change a movie in 5 seconds. If you don't like it, you could try another one. Back then, you rented a movie and you finished it because you had no other option. yeah. But so Jeffrey, so right after Final Destination, you have the second one. Obviously, I'm sure people are like, "Hey, this guy." No, obviously knows what he's doing. He's got this big movie. So like Return to Cabin by the Lake, Tamara came out in 2005. You have Day of the Dead. So like some really cool movies all while this is going on.
Yeah, it was an interesting time because I think that just, on it from a business aspect, I think the only misstep that I really made is I probably should have moved to California after I sold the first Final Destination, because this is where you do all the meetings and you meet all the power makers and shakers. So I just am very much a creature of habit. I loved working at New Line. I worked there during the 90s, early 2000s, which was like New Line's heyday when they made some of the most original, movies out there that nobody, like they made Blade. Everybody was like, who wants to see a black superhero, Marvel superhero? Huh? Wakanda comes out or Black Panther, like, oh yeah, and it's like, no, Blade was the first, bitches. But they made so many good films like Dumb and Dumber and The Mask, and just they took so many chances. So I loved working there so much. So even after I sold Final Destination in '97, I worked there. I worked there after the first Final Destination came out and was a hit. I worked there until I sold the story for the second movie. And then finally my boss was like, and Bob Shaye was like, we love you, Jeffrey, but you're a writer now. Like you need to go to Hollywood and write. And I was like, I can still write from New York. And so 9/11 happened that same year that I left New Line. So I lived down near the World Trade Center. So after 9/11, I was like, all right, I guess I should move to LA.
Yeah. Oh my God. You were living in the city then?
Yeah, I lived at Battery Park City, so we were like 5 blocks away from the World Trade Center.
Yeah. No, I'm in Jersey. I remember being a kid and just walking outside, and then it was just like, just seeing the smoke, and it was crazy. I couldn't imagine being that close.
Yeah, no, it was it was definitely it was insane experience. And so I moved out to California by the end of 2001. So if you think about it, it's 97, 8, 9, it's 5 or 6 years after I sold the first script. So by the time I moved out to California, nobody knew who I was. They didn't know I was involved in Final, because they were giving all the credit to like, the director, the X-Files guys, because they were out here meeting people and everybody knew them. So I moved out here and I got my agents like, well, I have to kind of reintroduce you to the whole town because nobody really knows about that you did Final Destination. I'm like, what do you mean? My name's like on the poster like twice. And so I kind of had to reintroduce. It was kind of trek of reintroducing myself to like the business out here. And so it's not like I had to start from scratch. That would be too melodramatic, but I definitely wasn't out here when I should have ridden the Final Destination wave. I didn't ride that right out to LA like I should have. So by the time I came out here, I had to be introduced to a whole bunch of, executives and then start taking a lot of meetings. And so it was a whole learning curve. Is like, shit, I should have moved out here.
Yeah.
Just most of it when I sold the first one. Like that's the only career misstep that I feel I've taken, despite some people probably saying it should have been Day of the Dead. But,
what, people don't like Day of the Dead?
Oh, I mean, it's funny. Here's the deal. Like I knew because they were making the movie and they'd already hired Steve Miner and they were looking for a writer. So I'm like, well, I know the fans are going to, even if I do a brilliant job and we have $100 million, there are going to be people that hate this movie because it's a remake of George Romero. But I'm like, on the plus side, I'm going to get to work with Steve Miner, who had done some of my favorite, like Friday the 13th and Warlock, and he just did so many movies that I loved. So, so I got the job, but then as I started writing the script, they kind of started making me take out all the stuff that was related to the original movie, and to the point where I was getting in fights with them, and I told them, I was like, look, we're going to get murdered no matter what we do, but the more you take it away from Day of the Dead, like, because most of my original pitch took place like in an underground bunker, like the original, and there were still like the key elements from the original movie, but they kept making me take so much of it. They kept making me taking it further and further away, and so I knew we were going to get murdered when it came out, and so then I was like, well, I wish they just didn't call it Day of the Dead. I wish they'd have called it, because I think it's a fun. If you watch it, it's a fun movie. Like, there's some like shaky cam, oversaturated green, yellow stuff and sped up stuff that I don't particularly like as a style for movies. But all in all, it's got like a really good cast. It's fun. It's bloody. It's just, it should have not been called Day of the Dead. Like they should have been called, but this was before Zombie Town. They should have called it Zombie Town, or something like that. And I think people would have really enjoyed it a lot more. But I mean, again, lots of great effects. We had Mina Savari in it, Ving Rhames, Nick Cannon, who's now populating the planet, Michael Welch.
He is, yeah.
Michael Welch, Anna Lynn McCord. So that was one of her early films as well. So yeah, we had a really wonderful cast, and we shot it in Bulgaria. So that was I got to go to Bulgaria. That was the first time I'd
cool
been there. Bulgaria, filling in for Middle America. So yeah, it was a fun experience. It was a really fun experience. But I just knew
who had you cutting things. Was it like the studio or
just people? Let's just
yeah. Okay.
Yeah. No, it was a studio, but Steve too. I always just say people because nobody ever asked me specifically. But
no. I was just wondering because it's like, hey, we want you to do the remake. We want to do a remake of this movie. So yeah, cool. You start. Hey, it's a remake of the movie. Obviously you have elements of the original movie. You would think that's remake.
Yeah,
it's in the word.
And I did up. I tried to update it and stuff like that. But yeah, I was getting it from. I was getting it. It was like, well, at first it was like, oh, there's too much. There's too many zombies, eating people, and it's like it's a fucking zombie movie. Yeah. So anyway, there were a lot of hands in that pie. But again, like I'm able, once the initial sting of like something coming out and people wishing death on you and stuff like that, I'm able to like watch a movie on its own merits, and I can say, just as a zombie movie, it's a really fucking fun ride. And it's got some great gore in it.
I don't know why people are like that. Even now, like if they remade any movie, they really think that, especially online, they think that they're going to go and like delete the original version. Like I love Jaws, and I'm not saying to make another Jaws, but if they did remake a Jaws, I would sleep the same at night. Nothing would change the original Jaws if a new one got made.
Well, I think the thing that frustrates me as a writer most is you hear, and this is obviously by people who don't know how the business works, is you hear, oh, well, Hollywood must be out of original ideas, because they keep remaking movies. And it's not that at all. Like, every writer that I know that's even written a remake has like, not hundreds, but dozens and dozens of original scripts. But the thing is, the studios, when I worked at New Line, like Bob Shaye was a movie lover, like first and foremost, like he loved movies, and all his, Sarah Risher and like Mike DeLuca, like all the creative team that was there, they were film lovers. They weren't business people. They knew business, but film was their first love. Then you started seeing in the 2000s and beyond, you saw a lot of business people start taking over all the studios. And now most of the studios, you'll have your executives that know film and love film, but most of the decisions are made by a board of people, and they're not going to take a chance on an original script when they can just dig into their vault and remake something, because they're already like, well, there's enough people that know this title that will at least hopefully guarantee us. They're looking for safety. They don't want to take any chances. So they're like, well, people know the Friday the 13th title, so if we put another Friday the 13th out, that's going to have a better chance at making our money back than if we put out an original movie. Or they'll do remakes, sequels. Now it's all about big IP, so that's why it's like, well, if we make a movie based off a book that sold 10 million copies, that's potentially 10 million people we know are going to go see the movie, so let's make that over an original script. And now it's got into video games and comic books, and so it's not that writers don't have original ideas. It's just they won't finance our original ideas. They want to go with the safe kind of thing. So like, I've had a lot of my films that we were able to get back from the studios, pretty much everything, but Day of the Dead had a big budget, but pretty much everything out of that was like projects of mine that independent producers bought from the studios, because they were just kind of sitting on shelves, and then made them for like a very indie budget, which is cool, but there's still also the give and take of like, well, we don't have the studio money to do this like I had hoped we could do it. But on the other hand, some of the movies have turned out really cool, and I love them, and it's like, plus I'm getting movies made, so I can't bitch, like that's my
I know.
That was my whole dream, is to work in the industry. And so I'm still alive and kicking.
You're doing it.
Cut to me
having
a heart attack tomorrow, and they'll be like, oh, he shouldn't have said he was alive and kicking.
No, but I think you're 100% right. I think it's obviously the studio's looking for something that's safe, but I think it's also the public too. Maybe if like there was one round of the superhero movies that came out, or like you said, like the book movies, that maybe if one of them bombed, maybe then they would reconsider, but never. Yeah, I don't think it will ever happen. Like Fast 10's going to come out and make $2 billion or something. And it's about like, it's nothing like the first movie. The first movie, they were stealing like TV, like VCR DVD combos.
Yeah.
And now they're like flying in cars.
Yeah. And it's, again, it's good luck if you get one of those, but
definitely.
Chris Nolan had to do 2 Batman movies before they would let him do Inception. So even the first Batman movie, which was like, it's huge worldwide hit, he's like, they still would not finance Inception. They're like, you have to do another Batman movie for us first. So, that's the kind of business that we live in now. And so it's hard to get anything made, to be honest, these days, but it's really hard to get an original story, because people are so afraid. And now the studios want you to bring a script to them, but then they want to know who your star is. And I'm like, you guys used to buy the script, and then, now you want we want the writers to go out and like, what are we going to pay a star with? Like, we don't have the money to pay stars. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah. But I guess you have to find that star that loves your script, and then that can attach it, because that's what Sandra Bullock did. She wanted to get like Hope Floats made, so she agreed to do Speed 2. That's the only reason she did that movie, was to get another movie made. And that's like a shame that Chris Nolan, obviously it's great that Chris Nolan did that, because Batman Begins and Dark Knight are like awesome movies.
Batman movies, yeah.
Yeah.
But it sucks that he's forced into that, like.
Yeah.
But that's part of the again, it's part of the trade you keep making. That's why we kind of stick with it, is like,
Man, so Jeff, what do you have coming up? Obviously, you're still writing. Writers are always writing. That's what I think it's fascinating about writing. Like directing, obviously, directors can't really direct if they don't have a script and actors and everything. But I think that's what's great about writers. You're always sharpening your tools because
Yeah.
you're always writing.
Yeah.
What is there anything that you have coming up soon that you're working on that's going to be coming out? I see like a few on the upcoming on IMDb. I know that's not 100% accurate, like Cloudland.
Yeah, like a lot, some of that stuff. I mean, some people get a little crazy by putting stuff up on IMDb before it's
I
ready.
know.
No, but what was interesting is, before when COVID hit, I got a job writing like on a couple of animated shows, which for Netflix
Cool.
was really cool. So one was called A Tale Dark and Grim, and the other one was called Samurai Rabbit: The Usagi Chronicles, which is based off the famous manga Usagi Yojimbo. It's a spin-off.
Oh, nice.
It's not like a remake. They're actually making a straight up adaptation of that, and ours is more of a kids spin-off. So that was fun to write in that kids animated space. I had planned. Luckily, I've sold the script, so the strike doesn't affect that. But I'm hopefully directing my first slasher film this summer.
Nice.
So the script's done, bought, nothing. I'm not scabbing, but I'm hoping SAG doesn't go on strike, because if that happens, then it'll just push it. But if SAG does have to go on strike, they're striking. We're all striking for the right reasons, so that's just a bullet I'm willing to take. And so I've just moved into more producing. Like I'm producing a horror film right now called Psychopomp that's starts filming tomorrow in Texas.
Cool.
That a good friend of mine, Paul Etheridge, is directing, and he wrote it. And it's got Jeff Ward from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. in it, and Shawnee Smith, who's well known to all.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. We have a good cast for that. So that starts shooting tomorrow, actually, in Texas. So that I'm producing. And there are a couple other things I'm producing, but a lot of the stuff, I just did a movie called Till Death Do Us Part. I'm mucking up the title of that movie, and my friend's going to kill me. But it was directed by this friend of mine, Timothy Woodard Jr., who did one of my films, The Final Wish, and then he did The Call as well. And it's an action kind of thriller that's going to be released this summer. I don't think the plot tells I can't really. It's about a runaway bride, but it's a lot more than that. It's just really funny, bloody action movie.
Cool.
So so a lot of the stuff I was working on has obviously been put on hold until the strike is over. But yeah, I've just been getting, diversifying, and I'm going to write something. I'm definitely planning on writing something for myself while the strike is happening. It's just I got to settle on an idea. I've got like 30 ideas. I'm like, I should write this one, and I'm like, this one sounds a little typical stuff that we always do to procrastinate and put off working. So
no, but it's cool that you're expanding, like doing the producing, and that movie has cool people in it too. Jason Patric or Orlando Jones.
Oh yeah,
so there's good people in that, and you nailed it. Till death do us part.
Oh, I did. Okay, good. I have a bad habit of, like, especially with names or titles of stuff, I'll think that I know what it is, and then I'll start convincing myself that I said it wrong. So yeah, that's gonna be a really fun movie that's coming out this summer.
Nice. That's cool. You're doing a slasher. That'd be really cool, because that's like your roots.
Yeah, I'm very, very excited. It's a little intimidating. It's funny because Guy Busick, who wrote the last two Scream movies with a writing partner, partnered up with another writer to write the new Final Destination, and it's based off a story by John Watts, who did the latest Spider-Man films. So we've got like a killer creative team behind that, and I can't talk. Yeah, I'm just.
I hear you.
I know what it's about. I know what's happening. And that's all I can say. But it's a really cool. It's going to be. I'm super excited to have. It's not just going to be kind of the cut and paste formula of like, it's a traditional, like, just an accident, and then everybody gets knocked off, but there's like one special rule. Like this one goes off in a cool different direction, but not in so much of a different direction that it's not a Final Destination movie. So
Sweet. No, I think we talked about it earlier. You kind of mentioned it, but I think I do like what they are doing with like the legacy route with writing. So I think it is really smart because you have the people like the Nev Campbell, Courtney Cox, Dewey.
Yeah.
You're watching Scream 5. You're like, oh, I know them. This is great. But then you have like the younger audience, Jenna Ortega. You have all these different things. So you kind of like get both like age groups for it, and then hopefully it can go because I'm sure now like when I was younger seeing those Scream movies, I'm like, all right, this is gonna be it, like after the third one, and then I was happy like when the next one came out, but now I'm like, they're gonna keep going. I think hopefully Nev comes back. I think she has to.
It's weird because I'm in a weird place because I love her character, but I always connect with these people like, I connect with them as like, I know they're not real. Like, I know Sidney Prescott is not a person, but I'm like, at this point in her life, like Sidney Prescott, since high school, has been stalked by a murderer and had everybody around her that knows love and die. And she's finally married and she has kids now. So I'm like, as much as I would, as a person, would love to see her come back, I loved how they said in the last movie, like, she deserves her happy ending. And there's a part of me that's like, I want to see her come back, but then in my mind, I'm thinking, this poor woman, she's married with kids, and she's still fucking got to worry about ghost. Like, what a traumatizing. It's like what they did with Jamie Lee, in the latest Halloween.
Oh, I know.
It's like, oh, her whole life has, been ruined by, they retroconned all the other movies out of it. So basically, she was traumatized by like. I mean, not that it wouldn't be traumatizing, but getting chased for 5 minutes when she was in high school. But she's an alcoholic now, and she lives out in the woods, and her whole life's been destroyed. And I know trauma does that to people, but for me, it's like with Nev Campbell, it's like, yeah, I do want to see her come back, but then there's a part of me that's like, she has, like as a character, like I want her to be happy,
Yeah.
Plus, I'm worried if they bring her back, then they're going to kill Gail off. So,
Jeffrey, man, what a chat! What a chat! I just loved hearing about how it started as a spec script for X-Files. Somebody says, "Hey, you shouldn't do that. Don't send it to them. You should write that as an actual feature." And then, boom, who's going to be directing it? The people from X-Files. Amazing. And I really hope he's able to direct that slasher in the next few months, because he sounded pretty stoked on that. So, yeah. So, your homework, Final Destination 2. I'm sure you've seen it before. We'll watch it again. Jamie's excited. This is one of the bigger movies we've done this year. Our horror sequel expert, Chris Egan's going to be back. So, that'll be a lot of fun. So, yeah. Don't forget to review, rate, share our podcast. Follow us on all social media at Sequels Only. And don't forget to check out our website, sequelsonly.com. Good night.
Good night, guys.